In a recent interview with Bishop Barron, Megyn Kelly, a Catholic and a podcast host, opened up about her deep frustration with the church's annulment process. She described it as intrusive and judgmental, explaining how difficult it was to have priests, men who don't personally know her, scrutinize the most intimate details of her past. This led to a pointed question: why should they have the authority to decide whether her first marriage was valid? For Megyn, this felt like something that should be between her and God, not filtered through church bureaucracy. Let's listen to what she has to say.
I have to tell you something. I am a sinner, and I am having a bit of a crisis of faith these days. I'm a Catholic, a lifelong Catholic, and I've been going through something, and I really wrestled with whether I would raise it with you in this interview because this is about Good Friday and Easter, but I've been thinking about what you just said, about what Good Friday means and being a sinner and where that takes me. And I just I'll outline it for you as follows. Maybe you can give me some guidance. I have been going through the process of getting an annulment of my first marriage. I've been married to Doug now for, 16 years. We just celebrated our wedding anniversary. But I never annulled my first marriage to my first husband, with whom I am still very friendly. He's a great guy, just didn't work out. And he and I agreed, he's Catholic too, that we would try to get an annulment and he would marry, I would get married to Doug in a church, and you know how that works. I'm not technically allowed to receive absolution and confession until I do this, and so on and so forth. Well, I've been doing it, and I'm going through the process, and my priest is helping me. And I have to tell you, instead of like renewing my faith or leading me on a journey where I would feel closer to God and embrace things like Good Friday and Lent and Easter, it's been driving me in a different direction. I didn't even observe Lent this year. I did not go to church on Ash Wednesday. I'm feeling kind of emotional just talking about it. And it's been like the in-your-face interjection of man in between your relationship with God that is getting to me. As I fill out these forms, it's not my priest, I want to make that clear. I really care about my priest, and he's been wonderful. But I'm submitting these forms about my first marriage to whom? Who are these people who get to review my personal private details and pass a judgment on my marriage, And I went to my cardiologist recently because I go once a year. He's a Jewish man. He tried to recruit me, Bishop. He said, in Judaism, we don't have any, there's no interloper. It's just you and God. And I've just really been wrestling with it. There have just been a couple of experiences where I've been questioning why. Why do I have to, who is the man making me jump through hoops in order to have a more authentic, blessed relationship with God? So that's where it's a weird place, forgive me, to kick it off with you, but I wasn't even sure if I'd raise it, but it's seeing you and hearing your first answer, I'm like, I've got to do it.
Building on that, the core of Megyn's concern, and one I think many Catholics can relate to, is a deeper question. Why should men, specifically priests, act as intermediaries between human beings and God? If we have the capacity to relate to God directly, to bring our sins, wounds, and questions to Him in prayer, then why is there a need to someone else to step in and judge that relationship? It's a fair and honest question, and it's one that many Catholics have quietly wrestled with, especially when it comes to personal matters like marriage, forgiveness, or spiritual healing. But as always, Bishop Barron responds not with deflection or defensiveness, but with a thoughtful, nuanced, and distinctively Catholic perspective. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, there's so much we could say about it. And my first instinct really is that I shouldn't be talking to you about this, because you should be talking to someone who's much closer to you and to the reality of the situation. So it's a sensitive pastoral matter. But I'll say just this. It's the church's deep respect for marriage that's behind that whole process, so that the church respects the sacramentality of marriage. And my instinct is, Megyn, you're doing the right thing, and to be patient with the process and be patient with yourself. I think you're making the right move. The church respects marriage, and so it insists upon honoring marriage as much as possible. And so, as you know, in the annulment process, the determination ultimately is, a full sacramental marriage did not take place. And the church, out of respect for marriage, takes the time to make that judgment. But I would say trust the process and have patience with yourself as you're going through it. I get the feelings, and I've dealt with people over the years who are going through a similar process and often are trying to process the same feelings. So I get it. I get the experience of it. I would just urge you to be patient with yourself and with the process. And maybe don't judge the church too harshly. The church is trying to respect the integrity of marriage, and that's what stands behind it.
One thing I've always admired about Bishop Barron is his humility. He doesn't jump to offer blanket advice, especially when he doesn't know the full story. In fact, even on Word on Fire show and throughout his public ministry, he often emphasizes the importance of turning to someone who actually knows your situation, like your parish priest or your trusted spiritual advisor. Because advice from a distance without understanding the person can easily miss the mark or worse, cause unintended harm. That's why his approach with Megyn Kelly was so wise. Rather than getting into the details of her personal life, he focused instead on principles, explaining why the church treats the annulment process with such seriousness and care. But as you'll see in the next clip, the annulment process didn't just frustrate Megyn. It pushed her to walk away from the Catholic Church entirely. Searching for peace, she turned to the Episcopalians. But instead of clarity, she found only more confusion. And yet, in a twist of divine irony, that detour led her right back to what she was truly longing for: the structure, the depth, the unapologetic beauty of the Catholic faith. Let's listen.
Well, I'll give you a glimmer of hope that I had in my own faith and my Catholicism. So feeling somewhat disaffected, but also missing like Mass and my rituals and just, the way you feel when you take the sacrament. I'm going to confess something to you, Father. I went to an Episcopalian church. I gave it a try. I'm like, you know what? It's kind of Catholic light. Maybe I'll feel something here. And I sat down, and within 2 minutes, first of all, we had a female priest, which, that's a lot. That's a big change from the way we do it in the Catholic Church. And I said, okay, it's fine. I can forge through that. And then everything was set up differently. The priest came down into the aisle and was sort of preaching from the aisle. I'm like, what's she doing over there? Okay, fine. The congregation turned. Okay, we're turning now. I don't know what's happening. In the Catholic Church, I know what the rituals are. They hadn't updated the Mass. We weren't saying, and with your spirit. We were still saying, and also with you. The little things where you're like, okay, it's off. It doesn't feel right. And then her whole homily was about the trans issue and how we need to be much more accepting of trans kids, which I don't believe is a real thing. I think that's really not what's happening to these kids. They're being pushed with social agendas that probably in 99% of the cases don't match up. And I think it's actually quite abusive. And when she went on, and honestly, Bishop, I got up and I got right out of there after the homily. And I thought, okay, this is not for me. And there's a reason I'm generally drawn more to the faith with which I was raised, where there are these strict rules that sometimes feel weird and intrusive, but resonate with me, from birth. What are your thoughts on that?
I can genuinely relate to Megyn's experience of stepping into a Protestant church. There is no denying that certain spiritual gifts like powerful preaching, vibrant music, and a strong sense of fellowship are often more prominent and emotionally engaging in those environments. They can stir the heart, no doubt. But for many Catholics, there is a still quiet ache that lingers, a subtle yet unmistakable sense that something essential is missing. It's hard to put in words, but it's there. The best analogy I can offer is this. It's like dining at a high-end restaurant where the food is exquisite, the service is flawless, and the presentation is beautiful, but the ambience just feels off. Maybe the lighting is too harsh, or the background music doesn't fit, or something about the atmosphere is jarring. You appreciate the quality of what you have been served, but you leave with the sense that the experience wasn't whole. That's often how Catholics feel when they step into a Protestant church. You can admire the passion and gifts on display, but there is a longing for the sacramental richness and apostolic continuity that can only be found in the Catholic Church. In the final clip, Bishop Barron gently encourages Megyn to stay rooted in the church. He reminds her and all of us that the church's moral teachings, its structures, and even its most difficult disciplines are not there to burden us, but to guide us. They're meant to help us grow in holiness, to order our lives toward the good, and ultimately to draw us closer to Christ, who is the truth we are all seeking.
Well, my first thought is stay with the Catholic Church. Cardinal George of Chicago, who is kind of a mentor to me, once said, the Catholic Church has all the gifts that Christ wants his people to have. It doesn't mean other gifts of Christ aren't available in other Christian churches, but the Catholic Church has all the gifts Christ wants his people to have. So I would say stay with it, stick with it. And then to your second point, I agree with that. The church's moral teachings are all about giving a sort of coherence to our lives. Our culture says in 1,000 different ways, do what you want, as long as you're not hurting other people, follow your own, instincts, follow your freedom. And the Catholic Church has always stood for an integrity to the moral life. There's a form to the moral life. And so we can construe them as, oppressive rules, or we can see them as an ancient tradition grounded in the Bible, grounded in Jesus, telling us about who we are and what the good life looks like and how to pursue it. I mean, there it's a bit like someone who's teaching you the golf swing. You don't want someone just handing you a golf club saying, now swing any way you want. No, you want someone that really knows the game and knows how to put those moves into your body. So that's the church, I think, in its moral teaching, its spiritual teaching. It's not trying to oppress us. It's trying to give a form and purpose to our moral and spiritual lives. So I would say, stick with that program.
I hope this video was helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you.